Hey everyone, this is James Pelton. I hope you had a good weekend. I am back here Monday. So we had a very full week last week, lots of different ideas and income opportunities and just a lot of things to think about. And you know what? This week's going to be just as busy. So really excited. Helen is someone that, again, I just stumbled upon. I was looking through Twitter at different things, and I thought she kind of had some unique things that I don't usually talk about, specifically about, buying businesses and things like that. So I wanted to bring her on. I just sent her an invite and just said, hey, would you come on and talk to my channel a little bit? So really happy that she was able to make it. Audience, what I need from you guys, hit like. If you have any questions as we're going, again, Helen's the expert. So bring those questions here and we'll bring those up as they apply, and we'll get going here. A couple welcomes. First off, Fastlane, welcome to my community. So glad that you could be here. Again, I'm just about helping my audience make more money, really. I mean, that's pretty much sums it up. So passive income, investment ideas, buying businesses like we're going to talk about today. So a lot of different ideas. So say hello if you're here, and then let me know if you have any questions as we're going. So Helen, thank you so much for joining us here today. Can you start with just a quick introduction of who you are, a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. James, thanks for having me. Hey, everyone. My name's Helen Guo, former entrepreneur turned, I guess, investor now. I previously started, I was in the startup world. I started a direct-to-consumer e-commerce business that back in 2018 that I grew just to over $30 million in about 3 years. Sold the business, but prior to that had 3 or 4 failed businesses in the whole startup world. And, after selling my business, knew that that wasn't the path I was going back to. It was painful to find product market fit and go from 0 to 1. And that's why now I am full-time buying cash flowing businesses from established or retiring business owners and taking those to the next level. So that's what I'm spending my time doing now. And, here to sort of show other people how to do the same.
Okay, I love that. I love those entrepreneurial stories of the failures, right? Because a lot of times people hit the failures and then that's when they stop. They get a failure. Okay, I'm done. And every successful entrepreneur that I've ever talked with, myself included, had many failures, but they kept going. They persevered through that. And then eventually they found one that, okay, here's one that fit and worked. And that's the reason they're successful. In fact, a lot of times I would say that the difference between successful entrepreneurs and unsuccessful entrepreneurs is just not quitting. Has that been your experience as well? Have you seen that as well?
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think a lot of times you just learn from all the mistakes you've made. I certainly did. We had some really bad ideas earlier on and, pivoted, fourth business in, I had already learned, some pretty important sales skills, how to raise money, things like that. But really, at the time, I didn't really know about the world of buying more profitable businesses and really stumbled upon that maybe like 1 or 2 years ago. And moving forward, I think I want to limit sort of the risk of failure, and that's kind of why I'm now buying cash flowing businesses instead of starting businesses from zero.
Okay, love that. Awesome. Well, I'd love to kind of talk about buying cash flow businesses and if that's, going to be a good fit for my audience. So maybe first question I would have is, who is this for? Like, do you have to have a bunch of capital up front? Do you have to be kind of entrepreneurial? Do you have to have business experience? Or who does this method of buying these cash flow businesses, who does that usually work best for?
It's a great question. So most people actually have more experience that they give themselves credit for, I would say. A lot of people who maybe like work corporate 9 to 5s actually, have a lot of skill sets, whether that's, marketing, sales, ops, finance. Those are all skill sets that you can bring into an existing business. That's just remember, you're not starting a business from scratch. You're taking over a business and taking it to the next level. And usually that business comes with an existing team, existing clients. So you don't need to figure everything out. In terms of, a lot of people also have various industry experience. You've probably, it might not be the best thing for someone who's, a fresh college grad, no experience whatsoever. But I think, most people who've, had a couple of jobs, definitely, have had experience in various industries. So I think there's a big opportunity for a lot of folks. In terms of, how much money you really need to get started, it's a lot less than most people think. And that's because, at least if you're American, you have access to this great program, arguably, my opinion, one of the best programs the government offers, which is the SBA 7(a) financing program, which gives you access to up to $5 million to go buy a cash flowing business. And that's buying an existing established business, not starting one from scratch. So it's a loan on great terms. And, you can basically go buy a business with, that's cash. I would say, like, you can buy a business that's cash flowing 250K a year, putting 50K down. You can start with less, start with more. There's various options that, we can talk about. But yeah, you don't have to pay a business all cash. It's kind of like getting a mortgage for a house. You can do the same thing and buy an existing business.
Okay, love that. Yeah, we'll love to talk more about that because I think that's one thing that really holds people back. I love what you said. It's easier if you find good deals, and I found this in real estate, in business, all over the place. If you find good deals, there are usually ways to come up with the money to make it happen. And I think that's what holds a lot of people back is they think, I don't have anything, I don't have anything going for me. I can't do this. Maybe before we get too far in, who I like to kind of disqualify people. So who would you say this is not for? There's people out there that wanted to get rich quick and they don't want to put in any work and they think, oh, okay, I saw this title for this YouTube video and I think, oh, I'll just buy a cash flowing business and then I'll make $1 million and I won't be any work. Who would you say that this model is not good for?
That's a really good question. Look, I think it applies to most things with entrepreneurship. But if you're not willing to work hard, if you're not willing to learn, this is definitely not for you. You're buying a business. You have to want to learn the business and be excited about it. And you're whether or not you plan on being actively managing it day to day, you should still care about a business and want it to succeed. So if you're expecting it to be sort of like 100% passive day one, that's probably unrealistic. If you want to work and get, be in a position where maybe a year or two down the line, it's, more passive, that's totally viable. But it's definitely not for someone who wants to, get rich quick and just sit there and hope that the business just runs itself and continues to grow.
Yep, absolutely. Especially up front. I like what you said there. Especially up front, there is going to be quite a bit of work. Like if you end up doing one of these loan programs, there's going to be some work that's involved in getting the right documentation over. It's not like you just go to an online form and say, hey, please give me $5 million to buy a business. And then you get the money wired the next day. There's quite a bit of work involved. So if you're not wanting to put in any work, then I would say buying businesses is probably not for you. It's not a get rich quick thing. It's not a no work type thing. But again, you can turn it into passive income, but there's going to be a significant amount of work up front. One more question before we kind of get into how this happens and what kind of it looks like to get going with this. What would you say to people who are watching right now? And you've kind of given some answers to this as we've gone, but people who are watching right now who think this is not for me, like there's no way I can do that. Again, people generally think low of themselves and like, I don't have any experience. I can't do this. This isn't for me. And they're thinking about hopping off right now. What would you say to those people?
Look, I mean, if you're looking at starting a business, there's no reason why you can't go out and buy a business. I actually think buying a business is a much smarter approach than starting a business from scratch. You're coming into an existing team, existing clients, existing systems and processes. And really, if you one day want to be an entrepreneur or want to start your own business, there's no reason why you can't buy a business from day one as well. It takes the same amount of grit and hustle, but it's a much lower risk way of going into entrepreneurship.
Okay, I love that. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about that. I know I said that was the last question before we got into it, but that brought up a really good point. If you're thinking about starting a business, sometimes people don't understand the amount of work that goes into starting a business, and that initial um, starting phase is by far the hardest part in any business until you kind of get to this inflection point of starting to see some success. Do you want to maybe, again, you mentioned a couple of them, but talk about the pros of buying a business rather than starting a business from scratch?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, look, the reality with startups is, 9 out of 10 startups fail. That simply is just, the facts. And it's because it's really hard to get a business from 0 to 1 to the point where you find product market fit, right? So, like, and that can take years. It can take years, 2 or 3 years before your business even hits profitability, which means a lot of both investment from like a capital perspective and also a time perspective from you. And I personally went through that, for years and years where, making very little, because we just never found product market fit with our initial, first couple businesses. And the difference with buying a business is you're stepping into a business that's established, oftentimes, more than 10 years old. It's ready. It's going to be cash flowing and putting money in your pocket starting day one. So it's just a very different type of thing, right? When you buy a business, as I said, you have existing customers. Oftentimes, you already have contracts that you're just stepping into and taking over. You have a team in place, and a lot of times those team members are already running the day to day of the business. And yeah, I mean, I think stepping into cash flow from day one is really important, and I think it creates actually a easier way to get into entrepreneurship if you need to have a certain lifestyle that you want to maintain, and you want to replace your income, because otherwise starting business from scratch is a huge endeavor for someone who's already maybe like working a pretty high paying or well paying job. So it's my perspective, and that's why I think a lot more people should consider buying a business to get into entrepreneurship.
Okay, I love this. I'm so glad I brought you on because most of what I talk about is starting businesses. And so I think you're totally right. You hit the nail on the head with so many of those things where so many of the difficulties of starting a business and that hustle that it takes at the beginning, if you can buy a cash flow business, those are already done. Product market fit and getting that initial push through, getting your first 10 customers is always the hardest part. And once you start getting those customers, now you have testimonials. You have, okay, I know what my business does, who it serves, and everything just gets so much easier at that point. So love that. All right, well, let's kind of talk through what this looks like to buy a business. So you sent me kind of the 5 steps that you would have in buying a business, and number one is how to come up with your search criteria. So I think that's a great question. Is yeah, how do you even begin this process? Like, do you look for something you're passionate about, or do you look for I don't know. Maybe I'll leave it to you. I don't even know. What do you look for in your search criteria when you're first looking for a business?
No, that's a really good question. I think even stepping back a little, I think there's a reason why there are so many great businesses for sale right now, because we're just going through the largest transfer of wealth ever. In the history of America, there are over 10,000 baby boomers that are retiring every single day, and they own over half of the businesses in the country. So that's over 5 million businesses that are going to need to change hands in the next 10, 20 years, because these folks usually don't have a succession plan. So like their kids don't want to take over these businesses. And now they need individuals like you and I to go and, take over and become the new owners. And so my search criteria personally that I recommend people start with is, buying an established business from a retiring owner. And, it's a great sort of reason for sale, because these people are selling for a real reason. There's nothing wrong with their business. They simply just want to retire. And, for that reason, those businesses are also for sale, really reasonable multiples and prices. They're often, in terms of coming up with the search criteria, they often fit a lot of things people look for, a lot of recurring revenue, a lot of existing customers, and good brand reputation, good reviews, things like that. A lot of these businesses have been around for 10, 20, 30. I've even seen businesses for sale that have been around for over 50 years. So that's kind of my always my criteria. You want to buy a business that's just simply a good business that's been around for a long time and honestly isn't going anywhere. It survived these booms and busts in the economy. I like to look for businesses that tend to be a little bit more boring. So you can obviously go and buy an e-commerce business, but there are a lot of plumbing businesses that aren't going anywhere, that where the owners are retiring and ready to sell. So yeah, I mean, my personal search criteria is usually a more boring business from a retiring owner with a lot of recurring revenue, contracts in place, ideally, an existing team in place, and yeah, and it's been around for a long time.
Okay, yeah, I love that. I like to ask, why is the business for sale? Which is basically what you're saying, because sometimes people sell because their business is failing or they don't believe in the future of it. Those are not necessarily the types of businesses that you're wanting to look for. Are ones where they're like, hey, people are moving away from this industry, so we want to get out and get a big payday before this business falls apart. A lot of times people want to sell businesses because there's a lot of internal turmoil that's going on. And again, maybe if you're feeling up to that, if you're feeling like, hey, I can come in, I'm good with people, maybe I can smooth stuff over. But if the reason they're selling is, hey, we got old and we don't want to run the business anymore, but we want to hand it off to a younger person who is passionate about this same thing, and it's like, okay, that's a good reason. That's a win-win situation. So totally agree. And Jonathan, he's started and exited several businesses. He said we sold several because our kids did not want to take them over. And yeah, that's what you want to look for. When I was looking for mobile home parks to buy, I was always looking for older couples who the mobile home park was great. It's not like they were having troubles or anything like that. They just didn't want to run it anymore. And it's like, okay, well, let me take that off your hands. And maybe we'll talk about this later too, but often in those situations, they offer really good seller financing and things like that. Like they're willing to, you don't even have to go to the bank. Hey, we want to fund our retirement. So as long as you can, give us some from the business for the next 5 years or something like that, there's some great deals there as well. So Jonathan says, great search criteria. I applaud her. So that's good, Jonathan.
Jonathan, thank you.
Thanks for coming here today, Jonathan, watching. So next question is, where do you find businesses to buy? So you kind of have an idea. Okay, I want to get a mobile home park, or I want to get this or that or the other thing. Actually, maybe let's step back one before that. How do you think through what type of business to buy? Do you base it on your passions, or how do you kind of think through that?
Yeah, I would say a little bit is, your personal background and experience. If you have a certain industry experience or experience with, marketing or sales, for example, you might want to buy a business that, has opportunities to grow on those fronts. But generally for me, I like to look for asset-light businesses. I like to look for service businesses. Those are usually great cash flowing businesses because they have really strong margins and you don't have to worry about all your money, being tied up in, for example, inventory or things like that. But look, they're great, e-commerce businesses for sale too. I'm not going to discount those entirely, but generally, I think I like to look for service businesses. But ultimately it depends, do you want to sell a product? Do you want to sell a service? Where do you want to be located? Do you want the business to be remote? Or do you want it to be an in-person business? Those are all the things that are going to inform your decision. I think it's a very personal decision. Obviously, there's some things that are like universal truths. I like to say, you want to find a business where people are coming back, they offer a good service or product. So you're not constantly trying to sell to new people. You want a business where the employees are staying and, they really enjoy their work. So you don't want to go in day one and obviously have to replace everyone. So there are a lot of things that kind of apply or across the board to other great businesses, but ultimately it does depend on some of these questions you have to answer about where you want to be and what kind of business you're interested in running.
Okay. Yeah. I always tell people, if you could snap your fingers and be in any situation that you possibly wanted, what would that look like? And you may not find a business that matches 100% with every single thing you're looking for, but it'll give you a good starting point. If you have 10 things that are really important to you and this business has one of those 10, well, then it's like, okay, maybe I move on to the next one. Maybe that's not the right one for me. Can I ask, what's your opinion on fixing up a broken business versus taking over a more well-established, successful business? What's kind of been your experience or your take on the difference there?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't do any like turnaround type deals. I think you can get businesses for great prices that way, obviously, but it's very hard to finance those deals. And I think I would rather take sort of like the easy road, which is my approach. Like, how can I maximize what I make with the least amount of time? And I think buying existing like successful business that's already established and doing well is the best time leverage. And because banks are willing to finance these types of deals because they have such a long track record of success, it's just much easier to get a deal done and be cash flowing. So
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great. And sometimes like, you can think of it as like house flipping. If you're a contractor, then you have the skills that they're lacking in their house, then it's like, okay, maybe I buy something that's in shambles and I have the skills to fix it up. Like I'm a software developer. So if I have, looking at a business and their biggest problem is some tech stack thing. And it's like, well, hey, I have expertise there that they don't. I can come in and fix that. But it's a much more difficult. At that point, you might as well start your own business because you're going to have to put in that amount of work. So thank you. That's helpful thinking through that. Okay, so you kind of have some criteria of what you're looking for in a business. Now, how do you go about searching? I think most people, they just hop on Google and businesses for sale. I mean, what do you do to start finding these types of businesses?
Yeah, I think a good place to start to even see and start exploring what's out there and what the possibilities are is going to a site like Biz by Sell. You've probably seen Biz by Sell around. It's a marketplace that basically lists a bunch of businesses for sale in your area. And those are businesses that usually have a broker, so an intermediary in between. Exactly, James has it pulled up. But you can just start to get a sense of like, hey, what's out there? So I would filter by established businesses. And when you're in Biz by Sell, and that way, because there are just so many niche businesses that you're never going to come up with or start. But the beauty of buying a business is you have the luxury of picking and choosing. So you can basically, once you start looking through, spending a couple of hours in there, you'll get a sense of like, hey, like this kind of is interesting. I didn't know this existed. Oh, this is interesting. And just kind of start listing. I always tell people like open a Google sheet and just start throwing in things that kind of jump out at you in there. I think that's always a good starting point. Of course, if you're going to be a lot more serious about this and you actually want to get into it, going on Biz by Sell isn't always necessarily the right way because everybody else is always looking there too. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of websites with businesses for sale listed. That's actually why I started my newsletter because my team and I go through all of them every week, and I share the best ones that I come across of the week in my newsletter. But another great way is to, similar to real estate, go look for off-market deals. And that can range from just like going around and putting your name out there in your community and, talking to business owners and seeing, who's maybe close to retirement age and looking to sell their business. It can even be from, starting to do more cold outreach, emailing them, sending them mail, calling them, and just, starting to reach out to people that way. Oftentimes you'll find better deals that are less competitive when you're doing more off-market outreach. But of course, the cons there are, these people are usually less warm. They're not necessarily ready to sell, and you may need to educate them on what they should expect, valuation-wise and like timeline-wise and things like that.
Okay. Yeah, I love that. And, scrolling through here might just give you some ideas of like, oh, I never thought about buying a profitable stone company, or something like that.
Exactly.
And then you start getting an idea for, some of these have the numbers that they make and things like that. And you start to get kind of an idea of, what's out there, what's available. And I think this sparks a lot of ideas. And for me, you can use like Biz by Sell for local stuff. I also like, there's like Flippa and places like that have more digital type businesses. And you do have to be a little cautious because there's a lot of scams and things like that. And sometimes when you get on like Flippa, if it's local, then you can be a little less careful because you can go meet the people, you can see the business, it's brick and mortar. A lot of times on Flippa, people are selling all sorts of crazy stuff. And a lot of times it's people trying to scam you and saying we have a profitable business that isn't actually profitable. So you just have to be a little cautious there. But yeah, I think that's a great starting point. And like you said, you just start networking around and you just kind of let people know, hey, I'm interested in buying businesses. Again, when I was looking for mobile home parks, I did cold call a bunch of mobile home parks, and I was like, hey, I don't know if you've ever thought about selling, but I'm looking to buy a mobile home park. Have you ever thought about that? And, and I had some people who are like, no, we're not interested. No, we're not interested. But once in a while, you'll have somebody, well, I'd be up for a conversation. And those conversations super valuable in just kind of learning. So awesome.
Absolutely.
Next thing we have, so kind of get an idea for what you're searching for. You start looking around for different businesses to buy. The third thing that we had here is how to value a business. And this can be very, very difficult for people. In fact, somebody asked about this. Let me see if I can find the question. I know somebody, oh, yes. Can we get a quick walkthrough on how to value a business for sale? So how do you think through that? Is it a science? Is it an art and a science? Or how do you do that?
It's definitely an art and a science. Like, you can look for industry comps of, businesses for sale and what they're trading for. And I think actually Biz by Sell does a report every year. And you can actually go through and see, and there are other sites that also show you. But the valuation of a business really depends on the size of business, the industry, how much recurring revenue it comes with. Oftentimes, like whether or not private equity is, bidding up prices. There's so many elements, like what the asking price of a business is in terms of like, how to actually think about how much a business is worth. I think I like to think of it from like a financing perspective. What can you actually afford? Because most of these deals, if most people who are buying a business are going to get an SBA 7A loan, and with the loan, you have to be, there are certain debt service requirements that the bank is going to make sure that this business can support. So ultimately, what that ends up meaning is oftentimes a business, really the valuations are actually capped at 3 to 4 times EBITDA. I would say most small businesses that are doing, let's say, sub $1 million in annual earnings, like you can expect anywhere from like a 3 to 5x EBITDA multiple. I would say it's pretty artificially capped there because most people are getting a loan. And yeah, so I think that's how I would think about valuing. Of course, you can finance in other ways, but yeah, I think that's kind of like a reasonable expectation.
Yeah, and sometimes for valuation, I've found, again, correct me if I'm wrong. You've done this many times. I've just done it a few times, but sometimes going to a bank and talking with them about an SBA loan can give you an idea of, if what the company's asking for is way out of whack. Like, the SBA loan, they're willing to give you 100K, and the business is wanting $1 million. Then okay, this is probably overvalued, or at best, I can't afford it. Like if that's all I can get is the SBA loan. So even if you don't use the SBA loan, I found it's helpful to have that conversation with the banker, because
Yeah.
they'll a lot of times tell you, okay, this is what we would want to see. These are the documents that we would want to see in order to give you this. And sorry, bankers out there that sometimes I talk with them and then don't end up using them, which is kind of a waste of their time. But I found that that's been a really helpful resource for me when I don't know what I'm doing. So no, that's awesome.
And
I
I
think
would say the other thing with, valuation is also just, it's less about like, hey, I'm not going to pay like $100,000 more for this business, but what are the growth opportunities in the business? If this business is going to, you think stay flat or, not really grow too much year over year, like you're going to value it a lot less than a business where you see, based off your skill sets, there's some really obvious opportunities that can let you, double or triple this business in the coming years. So that will also obviously affect valuation.
yeah, absolutely. What do you think about like Shark Tank and watching that? A lot of people get what they know about businesses and buying businesses and equity. I found almost all their knowledge is from like watching Shark Tank. So I don't know, is that helpful? Does that match up in the real world, or does that lead people astray, or what do you think?
I think Shark Tank is I think it's a great program. It's kind of like how I, got into entrepreneurship too when I was a kid. But no, I would say, it's those are also usually startups. They're usually all not profitable or cash flowing businesses. And usually I would say like they're pretty bad terms for folks but you're getting a shark, so there's that appeal. That being said, yeah, it's very different from, I think, reality of buying a cash flowing business and what you can expect valuation to look like.
Yeah, yep, totally agree. I've seen a lot of people that are like, well, Kevin wouldn't do that deal, and it's like, well, okay, this is not Shark Tank. So, but it can be educational. Like a lot of people have never heard of equity, and then they watch Shark Tank and they start to get, okay, you're paying this amount of money for 25%, and Kevin will bring in royalties, which is another thing you can kind of be thinking about, and so totally agree.
Yeah.
Also wanted to welcome Rentals B. Thank you for joining my community. We got a lot of good questions in the audience, so keep those coming. I will do a little QA at the end with Helen as well while we have her. So great. Okay, so we have our search criteria. Then we have, here's how you kind of start looking for businesses to buy. Here's kind of roughly how you start to figure out a value for that business. Let's talk about financing, because I think a lot of times that is like the number one holdup for people is, I want to buy a business. I have 10K in savings. There's not a lot when I go on biz buy sell. There's not a lot I see there for 10K. Do you want to talk about, we talked a little bit about SBA, but maybe you want to talk through SBA and seller financing. And then I know you had some alternative financing options too. You want to give us some details on those?
Yeah. I think, one of the most common ways to get a deal done is through a combination of SBA, the SBA 7A loan, and seller financing, which James, I know you spoke about a little bit too earlier, but effectively, the SBA will be able to, loan you 80 to 90% of the purchase price. So what I generally recommend is structuring the deal somewhere along the lines of, get the seller to finance 10% of the transaction, get the bank to finance 80% of the transaction, you put in 10% yourself. That's a good baseline or good benchmark for, roughly what you can expect. Obviously, you can negotiate better terms with some sellers. There's what James said, like sometimes, maybe you don't need a loan and seller will offer you, just pay him back, the next 10 years. But I think to be totally realistic, an 80-10-10 is a really good way to get a deal done. And it's, a lot of deals have been done that way. So I think that's a really good starting point.
Okay. Yeah. And, it never hurts to talk with the seller about seller financing, because you'll be surprised. I've heard of businesses that are making 300K a year, 100K a year profit, and they're willing to accept 30K with like a 10-year financing option, because they're just wanting that income. They want to retire. They're wanting that income coming in for the next 10 years. And so, I mean, it's a really good deal for both parties involved. Like you can get, this great cash flowing business for really not, 30K is not that much. That's not that hard to come up with. And there's some really great opportunities like that. So it never hurts to have that conversation and talk about that. Did you want to?
No, and you're totally right. And oftentimes it's just like, can you convince a seller that you're a good person, you really care about the business, and you want to make a lasting impact and help, make sure this business survives, and I think that's a lot of times more important to a seller than making sure that, they're making the most money right that instant.
So true. So true. Many times these businesses are like their babies, and so they're not wanting to just hand it off to anyone. A lot of times these businesses aren't wanting to put it on buy sell, because they're like, well, I don't want just anybody taking this over. And so if you do that outreach, you get to know people, you're a, personable person who has a vision for the business going forward. A lot of times you can work stuff out that way, I've found, for sure. Did you want to talk any more about some of the government programs and what's involved in getting that funding? That's something I know nothing about, really. Do you want to maybe give a little info on that?
Yeah, the SBA loan, or sort of like the alternative financing options?
Some of the alternative financing.
Yeah, I would say the alternative financing options are the sort of non-government options, but there's some interesting options out there if you want to, finance a transaction, whether you're doing it with an SBA loan in conjunction with or without. I think one of the interesting ways that I've seen people do these deals is through more like unsecured financing lenders. So, by the way, I'd be happy to introduce any of your listeners to ones that I trust. But there's some unsecured options out there where, especially for buying smaller deals, so like a couple 100K, let's say, in purchase price, where, they'll fund the entire transaction. The interest rate's going to be a little higher, but, you're putting nothing down or very little down. And the nice thing about, the non-SBA options is it's a little bit faster to close. It's a little bit easier to just get the deal done. And obviously, you're not working with a bank, so it's a little bit less bureaucratic. The other approach that I think not a lot of people know about is called the ROBS 401k financing, which is where you can actually use your 401k, I guess, savings and withdraw them early without any penalties or like tax implications. So that's something definitely worth looking into if you want to, leverage your 401k to put down into some of these, into maybe an SBA loan or whatever into a down payment. So those are both really interesting options that I think not a lot of people have explored.
Okay, question for you.
Oh, wait, I should probably mention the third one, which is
Yeah.
you can get outside investors to finance your deal. A lot of people, like me, I invest in these deals because I think it's a great asset class. It's a great opportunity. So, a lot of folks want to actually get in on these small business transactions. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been experimenting. My group has been doing NFTs to fund some different business ideas and things like that. Like we, in my passive income group, we've been using NFTs to fund food trucks and things like that. So again, if you find good deals, there are ways to get it financed if it's a good enough deal. So totally agree with that. What would you? I think sometimes some people I've interacted with, they want to go to the bank and start talking about an SBA loan or start talking with a seller about seller financing, but they're not very confident in their knowledge. Like they don't know what metrics they're supposed to know, and they're kind of worried about being embarrassed and the banker asking questions that they don't even know what they're talking about. What advice would you give to somebody maybe to help educate with some of the jargon? And just feel like they're ready to go into a bank and start discussing some of this stuff?
That's a really good question. There definitely is certain terminology or jargon, if you will, it comes with the space. It's not rocket science by any means. I mean, I learned this, not so long ago myself. One good place to start is obviously my newsletter. I share deals, but I also, I think more importantly, share my analysis on each deal. So if you go through my past newsletters, or even, I share them every Tuesday and Thursday. I actually will share with you, like, these are questions I'd ask about this deal. These are like some of the things that come top of mind to me. That's a really good place to start, and where you're kind of just, shadowing me essentially in looking at a deal. I think some other good places, there's a great book called Buy Them Build, that Walker Diebel wrote, which probably a lot of you guys know about. Harvard Business School also has a guide to buying small businesses. Those are, two essential books I think everyone should pretty much read if they want to get into this space. I have a free email course that anyone can sign up for as well when you join my newsletter. And I walk through that in about 5 days. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a wealth of information on the internet that you can really get. And ultimately, it's just about putting in a little bit of time to educating yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a less known tactic. This is the book that she was talking about. I'll leave a link here as well. But honestly, one of the things that I've been telling people to do that I think has worked really well is to hop on Chat GPT and just start asking questions. Like just say, okay, I'm about to go into a bank to ask about an SBA loan. What are some questions that I should know the answer to? And honestly, Chat GPT, I mean, don't take it as, financial advice or things like that, but it'll give you, hey, here's 10 questions. And then, it might say, it might have some words that you don't know what they mean. You can ask Chat GPT, hey, what does that mean? And it's a great way to learn as you start going in there. And I love that ChatGPT, you can just start asking it questions.
Totally.
But that's been really helpful, I think, for people. So
Yeah,
leveraging technology.
I also mentioned that a lot of banks actually offer office hours as well. So I would start joining those very early on, just kind of hearing what people are asking and just start listening. And honestly, like the more you listen in on these conversations, the more educated you're going to be. And a lot of banks are doing that. And I think it's a great sort of value add that they're bringing to the community.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, well, maybe we'll kind of start wrapping up here. If anybody we'll do these QAs that people had. So once you have your criteria, you found some businesses, you think, oh, this might be a good one for me. You've gone and okay, the bank has approved. You got an SBA loan available for this. Do you want to maybe just high level, because I understand you can't walk through it too, granularly, but maybe high level, what does that process look like of actually buying the business and that transition process and getting started? Can you just kind of give us a high level for someone who's never done that process before? What does that kind of look like?
Yeah, sure. What you can sort of expect is, you start talking to a lot of businesses. And usually there might be a broker involved, so you might have to speak to the broker, kind of like a gatekeeper. Then you start speaking to sellers, ask the sellers questions. Once you're like, oh, okay, like I think I may want to move forward with the deal, what you do is you submit an LOI. It's just a letter of intent. That's where it documents sort of like the general terms of the deal. Once the seller agrees to your LOI and you have a signed LOI, that's when you start going to diligence. So that's when you're collecting documents, you're reviewing their financials. I always recommend hiring both legal counsel as well as doing a quality of earnings, which is a financial diligence from a third party. That's really rebuilding P&Ls, doing proof of cash, things like that. We were just verifying numbers are accurate. That's really important. And at the same time, you're going through a bank to get an SBA loan. The bank's also underwriting the deal. Once you get an approval from a bank, ultimately, you just need to come up with the remaining cash that you're putting in. At that point, you've probably already negotiated what that transition will look like with the seller. Oftentimes, what you want to negotiate is making sure the seller stays on for a certain period of time. So usually the seller will stay on for, it could be 3 months, 6 months, a year. And at that point, you're kind of during that transition process, learning everything and absorbing everything you can from the seller. And, if there's already a team in place, that's even better. But, you may at that point think about, do I internally promote someone who's already doing well in the business? Do I have to bring someone outside in? But ultimately, like the first couple of months is key. You want to be there just to absorb as much as you possibly can from the seller before they eventually depart.
And where do you go? Where do you personally go when you need counsel on, like, you're in a situation? Oh, I don't know quite what to do in this situation. Where do you go for counselor, and where can my audience potentially go if they're getting stuck in the middle of this process?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think early on, I tried to surround myself with folks that have done this before, who've bought businesses. I run a community with 170 other business buyers, and that's a great place that I go to, and a lot of people come to ask questions about their deals. I think these office hours with banks are really helpful, and just trying to establish yourself and surround yourself with folks. A lot of them on Twitter or X, I guess you now call it, and just find people that you can kind of bring on as mentors, if you will.
Okay. Yep. Love that. And I think it's really helpful for people to understand it's not a science, it's an art and a science. So there's definitely numbers in there, but I think a lot of times people get nervous because they're like, oh, I'm not doing it exactly the right way, the exact right process. And it's like, there is no exact right process. It's just a matter of, even the cost of the business. It's just, what is it worth for you and what is it worth for them to sell? Like, it's just, as long as you can come up with terms that work for both people, it's like no one else has to really approve of it. It doesn't have to be conventional. It doesn't have to be traditional. It doesn't have to be, the way that other people would value a business. If it makes sense for you, it makes sense for the seller, then it makes sense. So I think that can maybe help people just be at ease. Like, there's not a right way to do it necessarily, but you can definitely learn lessons from Helen. Or if you want to reach out to me, I've bought in a few businesses, and audience, I'm happy to just give my thoughts, not financial advice. Don't sue me if it doesn't work out or something like that. But I'm happy to share. Here's what I think about it. Here's what I've experienced going through similar things. And at Helen's newsletter, we're going to talk about that here in a minute, but I think that would be a great resource too, just to kind of be part of that, maybe get a little access to Helen, get to know Helen a little bit, and maybe she can be a resource for you going forward as well. Awesome. Got a few questions here, and some of them we kind of partially answer, but maybe we can just kind of more directly answer them here. I love this. I've done it several times. You should have a roadmap as an exit strategy. How do you think through that? Do you have an exit strategy in mind when you're buying businesses, or do you a lot of times just buy them and just think, I'll just run them and do as best I can, and an exit strategy will make itself clear in the future? How do you think through exit strategies?
Yeah, I think it ultimately depends on your personal goals. Some people want to buy a business and exit, 5 years down the line, and other people want to, buy a business and have an, asset that they can leave on for their kids. And I think it depends on your personal goals. If you want to sell a business, let's say 5 years down the road, then you want to make sure that, pretty early on or, sometime before the sale, you bring on other management and you prep it for a sale. So that you won't run into the same issue of being stuck in that transition. So I mean, it ultimately depends on your personal goals. A lot of people will say these days who want to build holding companies, for example, will say if it's really hard to come across great businesses, and if there's a good business, why wouldn't I just keep cash flowing? So I think there are a lot of different approaches. It comes down to your personal preference.
Okay, good answer. Let's see. I'm late, so probably this was already addressed. Helen, can you share your framework for filtering good biz opportunities? So maybe can you share for you personally, what are you looking for right now? What's kind of the filter that you're looking for when you're examining businesses?
Yeah, no, it's a kind of going back to the beginning, it's a lot for me, it's all about retiring business owners. I want to buy a business that's been around for at least 10 years, that has an existing team in place, existing customers, and I really like seeing customers that have contracts with the business, and businesses that come with a lot of repeat or recurring revenue. Those are generally the types of things I look for. There's some also common red flags. One being client concentration. So like if let's say 10% of sales or 20% of sales or an outsized percent of sales is coming from one customer, that's definitely a red flag for me. To me, a red flag can also be, if the business has seen a lot of fluctuation the past couple of years over time. I like to see businesses that have just kind of survived booms and busts and that aren't cyclical and not dependent on are pretty recession resistant and not just dependent on like how the economy is doing. Those are, I love essential businesses. And for me, because I'm looking for businesses that cash flow, I generally like to look for businesses that are doing, north of 10% EBITDA margins, ideally more than 20. But yeah, I mean, I think those are a couple different things I look at. Obviously, there are a lot more. We can go into a lot more detail, but yeah, I think a lot of businesses in a lot of industries fit that criteria. It's just, but those are some of those universal truths I like to talk about.
Okay. Yeah, no, that a lot of nuggets there. I think that's great. Definitely be on the lookout for um just a few customers that are big customers that's most of their revenue. That sometimes trips people up, like you were saying, where okay, we're making 100K a year, 90K comes from this one customer. That is not that's a red flag because you lose that one customer and now you have no business anymore. So yeah, much better if I always like to ask, especially for software businesses, I always like to ask, hey, what's the percentage of businesses that are, your top revenue and mid revenue and low revenue, and try to get a feel for that. And a lot of times businesses are tricky about that. Like they just want to talk about their revenue and you'll have to dig a little bit to find out, oh, well, we have this one contract that's expiring with this one customer that has been 90% of the revenue so far. And they know that, and that's why they're trying to sell, is because they want to get out of that risky situation. So that goes back to what we talked about, is try to figure out why are they trying to sell the business. Any other red flags that you look for where you're kind of just like, now this is something I'm going to pass over?
I think poor retention. It's kind of like what you spoke about in terms of like what people like to talk about. Everyone likes to talk about growing their sales, but nobody likes to talk about how well they're retaining their customers, and really digging into those numbers and making sure that their customers are actually staying because they're offering a good product or service and that it's needed and in demand. That's super important, because you don't want to buy a business and have to be looking for customers every single day and almost filling this leaky bucket all the time, because ultimately it's just going to dry up.
Yeah, absolutely. I ran a software as a service company, and churn, you have to keep such an eye on churn, because people think, okay, 7% a month churn, that's not too bad. But a year, that means you have to redo your entire customer list every year. And so, yeah, keep an eye on. And also, like you said, it shows your product's not very good. If you're churning at the 7% a month rate or something super high like that, there's a lot of red flags there with, hey, this product is terrible. Nobody wants to keep it. And so those are some red flags that you should maybe be looking for. Another one I've learned the hard way is keep an eye out for internal turmoil in the company, because that it can just destroy a business. And again, that might be why they're wanting out, is because co-founders, things like that, make sure you know exactly how the business is all structured. And I've had people try to sell their equity in a business only to find out that the partner was wicked and it was a terrible business and things like that. So
and retention doesn't just apply to the products or service, but really applies to employees too. Oftentimes, you don't want to buy a business where all the employees are just going to leave 3 months down the line, and it's just that creates a really tough situation. And there are just some businesses where it's really, really hard to retain employees or find new ones. Some job markets are really, really tough.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Well, last question here, unless anybody has any last minute ones. But let us know your secret sauce for scaling and managing a large portfolio of businesses. So when you start buying multiple businesses, how do you give each business the attention it deserves, and how do you keep that straight?
I think it's all about hiring good or having good partners. I don't personally operate day to day anymore. So for me, it's all about like, how do I partner up with people who I know are invested, I know are going to do a good job, who I can trust. And ultimately it's all about the people.
Okay. Love that. Awesome. Well, if this sparked or piqued anybody's interest, Helen's newsletter is the place to go. And this is a free newsletter. Okay, guys. So I'm going to leave a link here, but go and just sign up for her newsletter. You'll start getting a lot of info. She walks through just a lot of the deals that she's going through, and just seeing, oh, she's looking at this deal and this is how she's looking through it. She also has this free email course, which I love that these are free resources. I really appreciate that, because again, for people that are just kind of wanting to get their feet wet a little bit, you hate to go invest a whole bunch of money in a training course that it's like, I might not even end up doing this. So go sign up for this newsletter. I would appreciate if everybody who watches this, whether live or as a replay, and you have any interest in buying a business, go sign up for the newsletter. I'd also say go follow Helen on Twitter. That's how I found her. I just popped up on my Twitter feed. It wasn't even an ad or anything. Twitter just knows, oh, James might be interested in somebody who is, an expert at selling and buying businesses. So go follow her on Twitter. I'll leave that link as well. Any final thoughts, Helen, for us? Words of wisdom, words of inspiration for us as we wrap up here?
Yeah, no, thank you so much, James. I think people always ask me, like, why do I share all this information for free? And ultimately, like, my real reason is there's enough opportunity for everyone. There's so many businesses out there for sale. I can't buy all of them myself. So initially I was just sending them to a couple of friends, but then people were like, oh, I realized like there are a lot more people out there who are interested. So that's why I started doing this. And I think, even since starting this newsletter about 10 months ago, I've helped, close over 25 deals for other people
Wow.
who have just found businesses through my newsletter. And it's just, it's a great thing. I love helping people. And I think, as I said, more opportunity, there's more than enough opportunity for everyone out there.
Yep. It's not a competition. It is. And I think this, almost all entrepreneurs have learned this, but when you provide value, money comes along with that. So you just provide value. I tell business people, hey, just try to provide value. If you just provide enough value, money will follow that. And if you chase the money, often that doesn't work out. You're often way better just chasing the value that you add. And so I love that you're doing that you're helping people. And hopefully some of my audience will hop in there and they can be helped as well.
Yeah, no,
So,
I should probably mention that, if you are interested in investing more passively, you don't want to go out and buy a business and figure it out yourself. There are a lot of people who read my newsletter that invest with me on deals that I vetted and that, I'm personally putting my own money into. So, yeah, that's of interest to anyone too. Another way to sort of get into this space without maybe putting in as much time.
yeah, absolutely. We'll have to talk too if you ever want to try an NFT funded business. I've been having a lot of success with that, so that's something that we could potentially talk about. So
absolutely, let's chat more.
Yeah, awesome. Well, hey, we'll go ahead and let you go, audience. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for being here week after week. I appreciate you guys very much. Again, the reason I'm able to connect with people like Helen is because I have an audience. So I appreciate you guys. If you didn't watch, I couldn't do any of the things that I do. So appreciate you guys very much. And Helen, thank you so much for hopping on and sharing your expertise. It was great. You're very good presenter, and I'm jealous of your background. Where are you at, by the way? If I don't
I am
mind
in
asking.
Miami right now. I'm trying out the whole snowbird thing this year. I'm normally based in New York, but I've been really enjoying the warm weather this year. So
It looks very nice. I'm in Lincoln, Nebraska, so whenever I see backgrounds like that, I'm like, what am I doing here? I should try the snowbird approach as well. So
highly recommend. Highly recommend.
awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much, Helen, and I'm sure we'll be connected here going forward. So thanks for your time.
Thanks, James.
All right, take care, everybody. Hope you have a great